So now let's talk a little bit about how to do some animation in Houdini. Now, Houdini might not end up being your animation tool of choice. You might prefer to do all your keyframing and stuff like that in another program, but at the end of the day, you're going to end up having to keyframe and pull curves around at some point or another, whether you're actually positioning geometry in 3D space and moving it about, or, you know, keyframing something like a force or a temperature, or something to drive your simulation. Keyframes are inevitable. So let's just look at how to get about doing some of that stuff here in Houdini. So I'm in a new scene here. I'm going to check if your layout doesn't look like this, just from this box up at the top, choose build, and then you should be on the same page with me. Down here at the bottom, this is our main timeline, and this should probably look familiar from another 3D app. You know, you've got your time slider here. If you just grab and drag, you're going to be moving around in time in your scene. And then down here, we've got a little these little boundaries. This sort of just isolates that timeline to a specific range within your scene start and end times. Then these outer two numbers here are your scene start and end times. So if I wanted my project to only be 120 frames long, I could come over here and click 120. And it has changed the range of this slider as well as the extent of the limit of this inner range selector to from 1 to 120 frames. So that's sort of how the main timeline works at the bottom in a nutshell. Other buttons that we've got over here is our transport controls, play, fast forward, step forward 1 frame at a time, backward 1 frame at a time. And then these buttons down here will allow you to go between keyframes. So let's before we throw down any keyframes, I'm going to just hop into these little buttons over here just to talk about them real quick. This first button here is the global animation options. If I click that, this gives you similar controls to like what we were doing down here, where you set your in and out for your entire scene from 1 to 120. I could change this back to 240, and that would extend the end of this. You set your frames per second, and a bunch of other settings in here that could come in handy at any point. So just to know that that's there, I'm going to hit apply. You can see it has updated the frame range of our scene. So I'm just going to close that. The next one is this audio panel. You can bring in your own audio if you need to animate or time up to it and whatnot. So before I get into these last two buttons, let's just throw down some geo and start to see how we can be keyframing our information here. So let's throw down a blank geometry node. I'm going to hit tab and type geo. And I'm just going to lay that down. I'm going to name this animation. And I'm going to double click to dive inside. And then I'm going to hit tab and let's throw down a super quad. So I'm going to start typing super quad and hit enter and just throw that down right there. And this kind of looks like a sphere. I'm just going to crank up the rows and columns real quick to something like 32. And I'm also going to switch my display background to be darker. So I'm going to hit the D key while my mouse is hovering over the viewport. I'm going to go to my background and I'm going to select dark mode. Just to make it a little bit more visible, I'm going to zoom in a little bit, and I'm going to turn off the grid. So we just sort of have our sphere here isolated. Okay, so the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to throw it on a transform node and wire that in. So with my transform selected and on frame 1, I'm going to set a key to I'm going to scale this. I'm going to scale the sphere down uniformly to 0. And then I'm going to set a key here. I can right click on this, go to keyframes, and click set keyframe. That is probably the slowest way you can go about setting a keyframe in Houdini. But once you have this keyframe set, you can see now this little button down in the lower right hand corner appears, and it will allow you to set keys pretty easily. So let's just slide our time slider out to frame 24, and we'll increase our scale to, let's say, 1. And hit enter. And then if I come down here and this key is now turned orange, if I hit it again, it turns green. This field turns green, and we have now our animation. So if I play this back, you can see plays back very quickly. It actually scales up faster and plays this whole 10-second timeline much faster than 10 seconds. And that's where this real-time toggle comes in. So if I click this button down here in the lower left-hand corner underneath the pause button, you can see that it has slowed our timeline down and it is playing everything back in real time, or as close to real time as the computer can manage. And if I, decrease my the expanse of my frame range here, you can see that it's looping. So this little icon right here is indicating that once it gets to the end, it starts over. You can choose it to play once. It'll just get to the end and stop, like so. Or you could say zigzag, and if I click play, it'll bounce back and forth between the start and end. I'm just going to put that back on loop, and there we go. So that's sort of what this little section down here does. Again, these keys right here are for jumping back and forth between keyframes. So it can go first keyframe, next keyframe, and to the end, and it doesn't have any more keyframes. So the other thing, these other buttons come in handy are just stepping forward and backward a frame. So there's that as well. And the rest of these are sort of self-explanatory. We can just rewind and fast forward using those icons right there. Let's talk about what's going on in our parameter view. We were able to right click on this to, set a keyframe. I personally find that the easiest way for me to set a keyframe is to actually just use the keyboard shortcut that comes along with this. So suppose I actually want this to have a little bit of overshoot. I'm going to just go out to, let's say frame 36, and I'm going to set another keyframe on this uniform scale so that it'll land at 1. And the way I like to do that is I just select the parameter, or you can hover over the actual text area, and you just have to hold down the Alt key or Option key and click in there, and you can see that it goes from that teal green to this deeper, richer green. That means that there's a keyframe on that frame, and that keyframe has been set down here. So now I can roll back to frame 24 and maybe increase this a little bit. And by default, if you're on a keyframe and you change a value, it is automatically keyed as such. So if we go back to frame 0 and click play, you can see that the sphere is scaling up accordingly. So other things about the color coordination that is occurring on these keys, if you see, I mentioned when we're on a key, this parameter will turn the green color. If we're not on a key, but there is an expression available, there's an expression controlling this channel, it'll be teal. Now, if I click over here, you can see that expression is a Bezier expression, which basically is describing the shape of the curve that is driving this animation. Now, if I were to go, say somewhere in the middle here and, change that scale once again to something like this, you can see that it turns this light green, kind of almost like army green kind of color. That is to indicate that there's a value that has been changed, but it hasn't been keyframed yet. So if we were to navigate away from that, that would break. So see, we go back to teal. So that's just kind of a little warning there for you. So that's sort of what the basic color coordination is going on in the parameter view. Let's go back down here to the timeline. What if we wanted to, move these keys around? Well, there's a way we can do that. If we were to want to say grab this key and move it over to frame 12, we could simply hover over it and then middle mouse click on our mouse and then just drag that to the left, and that you're effectively just dragging your keys around like a dope sheet down here. So that's how you do that. Other things, if you wanted to select and drag multiple, you could hold shift and select multiple keys like this, then middle mouse and drag them around. You can see that updating as such. And also, if you shift and click on the end of this little bar, if you've dragged a region, you can scale your keys. So again, what I'm going to do is I'm going to just scale this out a little bit. I'm going to hold down shift and drag with my left mouse button, over my keys down here. Then I'm going to go out to this end where it says, 20 right now. I'm going to middle mouse, and I'm just going to drag that out to slow things down a little bit. And just click away, and the selection region goes away, and now our animation is slower. Cool. So that's pretty basic stuff. Now let's look at the animation editor. Now the animation editor is actually over here up on these tabs where our scene view is. The animation editor is hiding just behind there, and you can see that we have our curve here. Now if I hit this home icon right here, that will frame my curve, and then we can see what we're doing. Now, for the purposes of wanting to see visual feedback, I'm actually not going, I want to leave the scene view up so we can see what we're doing. So I'm just going to click back over here. And there's multiple ways that you can bring up your animation editor. One of the ways is down here in the lower right-hand corner, there's a button that will bring up the animation editor in a separate floating window for whatever node you have selected. Or you can go to the parameter that you have keyed, and you just shift click on it. So I just held down shift and clicked on that area, and it scoped the parameter that's animated. It's in the channel list over here. So I'm going to hit the home key, and you can see that that is framed up nicely there. For the rest of this animation, I'm just going to do, or this, for the rest of this tutorial, I'm just going to do a little bit of a layout modification just so that I can dock the animation editor down here. So I'm going to go in the upper right hand corner of this area where this little down arrow is. I'm going to click that, and I'm going to say split pane top and bottom. And then over here, where it says scene view, it just makes another scene view. I'm going to right click here, and instead of scene view, I'm going to choose the animation editor. And now we have our animation editor and our scene view just sort of stacked like that. Just to make things a little bit easier going forward. So navigating around in here is very similar to how it's done up in your scene view and in your network view. If you hold down the middle mouse button, you can drag around. The right mouse button zooms in and out. So you can easily frame up your keys manually doing it that way. You can see if I move my mouse left and right, it stretches along the x-axis and vertically along the y-axis. I guess that would be the time axis and the parameter value axis, or whatever you want to call them. At any rate, so there's that way of getting around in here. Similar to how you would get around in your network view, using your middle mouse, right mouse to zoom, etc. Other things, if I hit the F key, I think that will frame the selected. So if I have nothing selected in my channel list over here, and I hit the F key, that won't frame anything. If I hit the H key, that doesn't seem like it wants to frame anything either, because nothing's actually scoped. If I click the uniform scale and hit the H key, that's the same as hitting this home icon here. So additionally, like if we were, say, had our animation squished like this, we only wanted to scale vertically, we can vertically stretch it or horizontally stretch it. So that's what those two buttons below there do. So I'm going to throw down a couple more keyframes here. I'm going to just, let's zoom in here. I'm going to hit the D key and change the background to be dark. And I'm going to turn off the grid by hitting this button right here, just to make it a little bit easier to see. Also, I don't want this origin gnomon in here, which is that red kind of X that's going through everything. I'm going to hit the D key one more time, go into guides, turn off the origin gnomon, and there we are. So up here in our super quad, let's before we get into this transformation, I'm just going to flag the super quad. I'm going to zoom out a little bit, and let's just do a simple animation on this. I want to change, let's see, I want to change this sphere from sphere into a cube. So I'm going to just hold down the option key and click my X and Y, XY exponent and my Z exponent. And then I'm going to slide out to frame 24, and let's just modify these. You can see this is kind of a cool, little node. You can actually kind of get things to start to change shape if you modify these values, and you can even get some really crazy, like almost pyramid-like, or I like to call this the Sims icon that used to hover above the people's heads in that game. But yeah, let's just turn this into a cube. I'm gonna go slide this almost all the way to the left. I just want to leave a little bit of a rounded corner on this, and I'm just gonna scale this radius, the vertical radius, back to 1. So something like that. And just to make these consistent with one another, I'm going to just set this first one to 0.02 and this one to 0.02 as well. And then I'm just going to option click both of those. You can see here my slider has gone away on my XY component. That just happens sometimes depending on what hotkeys you're hitting, etc. I'm just going to click it. You just click the parameter and it'll bring back your slider there. So cool. So here you can see that we're switching from well, it looks like I didn't properly key my XY component. So I'm just going to go back to frame 1 and change that to be a 1 here. It looks like I'm getting a little bit of some strange behavior. If I isolate my channel here, it looks like it doesn't really have a proper function selected for our keys. So one way you can do that, I'm just going to select these, and for the function, it looks like I accidentally was typed in a value instead of the function that it should be using, which we want a Bezier. So with these keys selected, if something like this ever happens, just a little debugging, you can go down here and select your Bezier function. And now you've got your keys back. So basically what happened was I was in here and I set my keyframe value on this Bezier when this expression that was driving it was exposed. You don't want to do that. Like if I click 1 here, things get messed up and it doesn't know what I'm trying to do down here. So you can fix that by just selecting your keys and choosing Bezier. And here we're back. So now we're animating from a sphere into a box. Like so. I'm finding that the wireframe is a little bit distracting. So if that's visible on yours, I'm just going to go up to this little icon here and turn on smooth shaded so I don't have to see all those lines. And cool. So here we're going to morph it from a sphere into a cube. Nice. Let's just let it hold for a couple seconds. I'm just going to increase my time range here. And then on frame 48, I'm going to click each of these fields again. And then I'm going to transform just to set another keyframe. Then I'm going to go out to frame 72. I'm going to transform this into a cylinder. Let's see if I can do, yeah, something like, if I take the XY exponent back to 1 and option click, now we're back to a cylinder. So let's just horizontally frame those keys, and there we are. So let's get into pulling around these handles. So as usually you're going to want to be on the Bezier function. From here, you can set a bunch of different options like cubic or ease in and ease out. I usually just stick around with the Bezier. I find that to be the most intuitive way of manipulating my keys. So, you know, let's give it a little bit of more exponential ease. So I'm going to, let's grab for this keyframe right here, our second keyframe on keyframe 24, I can just grab this handle and start dragging it around to get different results. If I wanted to keep this level as I was dragging, I'm going to just hit Control Z to undo real quick. If I hold down the Control key and grab this handle, it will keep that angle no matter where I move my mouse. And that way I'm just sort of scaling out the acceleration on that key. So that's a good trick to get some nice, to keep the slopes of your handles consistent. So I'm just going to do that for a couple other keys here. And another thing that you can do is you can also move your keys around in this view. So for example, if I wanted to move, and the keys are actually locked to their vertical and horizontal movement. So if I wanted to move this key horizontally, you got to click this little area, this little dot in the middle, and that allows you actually only to move it vertically. And if you wanted to move it horizontally, you hover over these bars that exist on the top and bottom, and that allows you to exclusively move the key forward and backward in time. So there's never really, at least not a way that I've found yet, where you can move along both axes at the same time. And me personally, I like it. It allows me to remain precise. another cool thing is, suppose I'm like here and I actually want to set the values of these keyframes. Well, say I want to move this keyframe to frame 12 and have it be a value of 0. I can actually set that down here in this lower area. So I can set this to frame 12 and I can set the value to 0. And I've moved my key precisely with the values that I want them to be in. So suppose I want to move these two keys back. Well, I could just pick select the entire range, these two keys right here, and then hover over one of these horizontal bar or vertical bars and just drag it horizontally to bring it in a little bit tighter. So cool. It looks like because this horizontal adapt is enabled, you can see it's readjusted the size of this window to fit the smaller range that I'm working in now. So now we've got these tools across the top. We can kind of talk about what these mean. We've been using this selection tool so far just to kind of move and manipulate our handles. The next one is this box. This box handle will allow me to do a similar scaling operation like we did before. So I'm just going to grab these two keys, and you can see that it's created this nice little box window around here. So if I wanted to scale these two keys together, I could just come over to the right-hand side until this handle is visible and just drag it as such. And I've adjusted the, scale of those keys. So when I hit play, things are moving a little bit faster. Now, as you can see, I've actually scaled out these keys, but I haven't moved my Z component. It wasn't actually shown in my channel list. So I'm just going to, if I have the XY component selected here, I'm just going to shift click to view the Z component, and let's just zoom out a little bit, holding down the option key, or I don't even need to hold down the option key. I just kind of do it out of habit, but I'm just going to hold down the alt key and zoom this out. I'm going to actually bring this, this Z exponent in, and I'm going to try and just kind of match the slope a little bit, holding down control to keep those anchors sort of steady there like that. And this one doesn't really need to be lined up there, but I'm going to do it anyways. I'm just going to grab this and bring it back like so. Cool. Yeah, it looks like I've got this key on my my XY component. I actually wanted this to be set to 0.02, so I'm just going to change its value to 0.02. That remains so that it has this kind of almost beveled edge, this like filleted edge to it. And then I guess, other things with these toolbars up top. If you wanted to, for your keyframes here, suppose you wanted to kind of untie your handles. I'm just going to go back to our selection view. This icon lets you untie your handles, so you could actually have inconsistent slopes between your keys. So you get some different behavior like that. Again, if I wanted to, break the untie the handles of the of this XY component, I could just come up here, untie, and start to create more bouncy behaviors if that's what you're after. I'm just going to change this animation range down a little bit. You can kind of see that bouncing around now. That's cool. Other things, if I grab these two and say I want to retie them back together, this icon allows you to tie handles, and it'll try and match a slope or something like that. If I wanted these to be horizontal, I could hover over this icon, and that'll set the slopes to automatic. And then we're sort of back to where we started from. And now you can see what it's done is, since like a previous edit, you can see that there's this kind of grayed out, I'm just going to zoom in here to make it a little bit more visible. You can see that there's this darker version of this animation from a previous step that we had made. Now, I can actually swap between those two using this. This is the snapshot, an animation snapshot. So we can actually pop back and forth between that and our current animation. Now, if I'm cool with what I've got and I want to commit it, you don't really have to do anything. You can just navigate away, and then when you come back, it's all gone. But if you did, if I started pulling this keyframe around, you could see in the green channel, the Z exponent, I've got a little animation snapshot left over. I could actually pop back and forth between those two, or I could just can it in general and commit to what I've got. So I'm going to just bring this back down And so here we are. So another thing that you can do is you can actually add keyframes while you're in here. So suppose you wanted to add, something right here. If I'm just hold down Option, you can see that it Option and click with the left mouse button. It just kind of adds some keyframes in there that in case that's something you want to be doing. And again, I can just go over here, just hit Option, and it will add a keyframe to every channel that is scoped. If I only wanted to add it to the XY component, I would just select it in my channel list over here, and boom, there you go. Again, if I hold down Control and drag, you can see that it's keeping the slope of these handles when I drag them, which is really handy. Lastly, if you look at this keyframe right here, if I'm just going to grab this keyframe, and I'm just gonna drag it a little bit. You can see that it's actually snapping to whole keyframes. Now, if I box select these, when you start scaling keys around, you can wind up with keys that actually aren't on whole keyframe values. And right now, it's actually snapping my values to whole keyframes. If I go to my settings up here, and sometimes you'll have snap moved keys to nearest frame. If that isn't turned on, and you box select and drag, you can see that these keys down in your timeline turn bright green. That's to say that they're not actually on whole frame, on whole frame keyframe. So if I go in here and I select this key, you can see that it's on a decimal, like 32.9. It's not actually on a whole frame keyframe. So if I wanted to snap that to the the nearest keyframe, I could just select that, and then if I hover over this icon, it will snap move. And I turn this, I hit this button and turn this on. It will allow me to snap my keys to whenever I move it to a keyframe, it'll allow it to snap. Now you can also see I've got two. If I go back to my my regular selection tool, I've got two handles over here. This is actually, it is untied the anchor entirely. So if you look at this icon right here, you see where it says untie values. So similarly to untying the actual handles, it is untied the values of those actual keyframes. So we'll get a jump when we go through this section. We can actually tie these values back together by selecting them and then clicking on this button right here, which is the tie values button. Now we're back to normal Bezier. So again, for this one and this one, if I click this, we're back. Values are tied, handles are tied. Lastly, a lot of you are probably familiar with working with the dope sheet. That can be found up here. You can toggle between 3 different modes. You've got your animation curve editor, which I'm most fond of. Then you have your dope sheet right here. And then over here, this is a table view. I barely ever use this, but the dope sheet is familiar. It's very similar to other dope sheets. You grab a key and you can move it. So you have to click on it first before you can move it. For example, if I wanted to, move this, if I wanted to move this key over to frame 24, I can't just grab it and move. It's actually creating a drag selection when I just click on it. But if I click it and then click it again to drag it, there I'm moving my keys around. Again, you could click drag over multiple and then click drag those, and you're moving them together. And I think that this icon here would allow you to scale like a region tool. So if I grab like this, now I'm able to select my regions, and I can use my left mouse button to resize those regions. Then if I go to the end, middle mouse click, I can scale those keys, similar to how I was doing down here at the bottom on the timeline. And just to finish out this lesson, I'm gonna just polish this up a little bit. So let's go back here. I'm going to delete these keys, hitting the delete key. I'm going to get rid of that key. It's not really what I want. I'm going to grab these handles and start to dial these in. Let's just reset these to automatic and change this. Control dragging these handles out. And let's just give this a little bit more of a pause here. So I'm just going to drag these out to the right. to about 24. That's good. So we're going from frame 1 to 12 to a box, and we're going to hold for a second, and then we're going to switch to a cylinder from 24 to 36, let's say. And that's an extra key that I don't need, but I do want some extra exponential type easing on the XY component. So let's do something like that. It's looking good. And then if I go back down here to the transform, you can see I've got my transform, my scaling curve here. So let's see what that looks like when we add our scaling. So scale up. It starts as a box. No, it scales up as a sphere, turns into a box, and then eventually becomes a cylinder. I actually want the scaling to occur before as it arrives to being a box. So let's I'm just going to grab these two keys. I'm going to grab this vertical bar and drag it over so that it peaks at box and then lands like so. And I'm just going to grab this key and bring it back a little bit so it just kind of has a little bit of bounce. Cool. I'm going to tighten up the time slider here to about frame 48. So this comes out, and then it morphs into a box, or into a cylinder at frame 36. So in anticipation of that, I'm gonna let's set a scale keyframe again here. Option click on the uniform scale on the transform. Let's go back here and click the uniform scale as well. So we've got scale there. I'm going to just option click right here and bring that down a little bit and bring this one up a little bit and just click again, bring this back down to 1. So it has a little bit of a bob to it as it's changing sizes. In fact, I actually want to reverse this. I want this to go up and I want this to go down. And then I want this one to settle out somewhere in the middle there. I'm just going to add a little bit of just holding down the control key and pulling these handles a little bit like so. And we'll go like, yeah, something like that. Cool. Now, like if I wanted to add a little bit more, I'm just going to throw in another transform. And here I want to add just a little bit of rotation. So also to get this to loop, we're going to want this to actually turn into a sphere, and then we want this to turn into a sphere at the end. So I'm going to let's just go to our super quad. I'm going to change the Z component. I'm going to set a key on the Z component here, and we're going to just extend our playback range a little bit further. And we're going to go out to 60 and change the Z component to 1, option click and set a key. And then I'm going to control drag this handle and this handle in to add some more easing there. So yeah, we turn back from sphere to square, cylinder, back to sphere. And let's match up with our scaling. So we pop out, we pop in, and let's just do another pop out. So I'm going to option click here. I'm going to go forward, and here I'm going to option click at frame, frame 55. That seems good. And then out to frame 60, I'll actually scale this down to 0. So we're going to just bump this guy up a little bit. Actually, well, maybe we'll hold it there. We're going to bump up this second to last keyframe. Just going to grab these handles a little bit like so. Just give it a little bit of love there. Yeah, I'm thinking this key needs to come up as well. We'll go up right here. And this key, I can probably just can this key, bring this this key over just a little bit. How does that feel? Let's play that back. I'm going to tie these two handles together by setting the slopes to, whoops. I'm going to select this, tie these handles, and set the slope to automatic. And you know, it's doing, or the slopes to automatic. It's actually trying to align it with this curve. So I'm just going to bring it out horizontally like that. Yeah, actually, I think I might want to keep that slope there, like so. Yeah, so I'm pulling that back. Yeah, I don't know. Yeah, I think I need that keyframe in here, actually. Need that keyframe after all. Just that little pause there. Cool. So now down here, I'm going to just add some, let's add some rotation. So I'm going to select both these and see, okay, I got my, this, yeah, I'm going to select this bottom node. I'm going to, let's set keyframes on all the rotates. So instead of clicking in individual parameter views, I'm going to individual parameter boxes. I'm going to just option click on rotate entirely, set keyframes for the whole thing. And then as we get up to frame 12, I'm going to, let's middle mouse click and rotate in, let's rotate -90 degrees. So -90 here, and then I'm going to option click on this parameter. So looks like it didn't actually set key. So back to frame 0, I'm going to set this to 0 and option click there. So we've got, yeah, a little bit of rotation there. And it looks like it's trying to bring, it looks like the key that I set was actually out on frame 66. So let's just go over here and scope all this stuff. I don't want this last keyframe over here. Whoops. I'm going to just select that with keeping my mouse down in this window and hit delete. Then going back to frame 0, you can see that it actually doesn't really have any information here. I'm going to just, if I want to delete the channels for this keyframe, I'm going to right click, say delete channels. And that clears the animation for those channels. So I'm going to, as this pops up, I'm going to set another keyframe here and here. And so we pop up here, and let's do a little bit more, rotation on this guy. So I'm going to actually, let's see, let's rotate this guy like so. We're going to set a keyframe at there. Just going to slide that over to 24 and 36. We're going to rotate this by 90 in the Y. So we've got our keys here. Boom. And let's do a little anticipation on this. So this guy pops out. And then at this point here, I'm gonna grab I'm gonna set it. Whoops, I'm gonna undo that. I'm gonna set a keyframe here on the Y and just add a little bit of anticipation in the rotation here by pulling this guy down. Let's just pull this handle out to give it a little bit more time for that anticipation. And let's see, when we get to this section where it's scaling down, I'm just going to add some more rotation to maybe the, yeah, let's rotate. So I'm going to set a key. Let's go to 0 on this value, on the Z value. 0, option click to set a key. And at 60, we're going to go -90. And then option click that again. So actually, I want to go +90. So when we get over here, I'm going to just remove that minus sign so that it goes vertically like that. And I'm just going to option click in the middle here. I'm going to only select the Z, option click here, and pull this back a little bit. So we get a little bit of anticipation. I think that this needs to come back this way for it to, yeah, something isn't right here. I'm going to pull up my other keys and see where, yeah, on here. Yeah, I just need to pull these guys over a little bit, it looks like. So I'm going to select these two blue keys, and by dragging until I get that handle highlighted, just going to pull them over here. And let's pull this guy back a little bit. I think this is a little bit too much. Yeah, let's pull this guy in. Let's bring this back a little. Yeah, something like that. That's feeling good. Yeah, so cool. Let's see. Let's just, I'm just going to decrease the bounds of this so that it loops nicely. Cool. Yeah, that's feeling pretty good. I think that, like, as a last step, one thing I would want to show is that you can actually, what is really cool is that, like, if I suppose I wanted this whole entire thing to go a little bit faster, for example, you know, I could do the thing where I could grab all my nodes and then grab all these keyframes and start scaling them around using the box selection tool. Or we could do something like use the retime node. Super handy node. Everything leading into the retime node, you can, you know, adjust the timing of. So let's just going to hit tab and type retime. And in here, let's just wire all this stuff in. And here we've got a few options. Evaluation mode by speed. I could change this by frame. I could set the frame manually, shift the range. I'm just going to go by speed, and I'm going to increase the speed from 1 to 2. So now it should play back twice as fast, which is pretty cool. You know, we've got all of our keyframes here, but you can see that with this retime node, it's actually finishing the animation halfway through, whereas all these keys are, you know, off to the side. So that's one option of how you could retime your animation, just bringing it back to the original speed that we had it. Another thing you could do is you could use, you know, for example, by fit range. And what we could say is our input frame range, we know, is going from 1 to 60, 161, like that. We could change our output frame range to fit whatever we want. Like instead of frame 1 to 240, it has expressions in here for the start and end of our scene, which is 1 to 240. That's this $F start and $F end. So if you just click this button, you can go back and forth between those expressions. Yeah, so that goes, if we wanted to make ours shorter, we'd actually need to change this value. So I'm just going to right click here and say delete channels, and we'll change the range from, say we want it to go from 1 to 35. And then you'll see our entire animation completes between frame 1 and at frame 35, we're done. So if I set the end of this range to 35, now we've retimed our animation to fit and play back a little bit faster. Just give it a little bit of pause on the end. Cool. So now you've made like a nice 3D loading icon for, I don't know, a web page or something. So that is the basics of animation and setting keyframes in Houdini. It'll come in handy as we go down the road, and you're going to want to do plenty of experimenting on your own, I'm sure. And it's just important to know how to properly set keyframes in any program. So that'll come in handy in the future, and in the next lesson, we're going to be working on getting our project set up, and then we're going to work on a little bit of procedural animation using expressions in addition to keyframes, or instead of keyframes. So stay tuned for that. It's going to be fun, and catch you on the next lesson.